All right, so today's webinar is called Excel Blueprint, 5 steps to becoming an Excel hero with the modern Excel power tools. I'm going to talk about the new modern tools. And you're in the right spot today if you've heard about Power Query, Power Pivot, or Power BI, but you're not sure what they do or how they fit into your workflow. Maybe you're seeking a promotion or a job interview, and you're not sure if you have the right Excel skills for the job. Or just overwhelmed and stressed out with all the deadlines you have going on. You need to find a faster way to get things done. Or you want to become the Excel hero of the office and gain the recognition you deserve. We're going to be talking about Excel heroes today as well, which I'm excited about. So on today's agenda, like I said, we're going to talk about the modern Excel blueprint, how the new power tools fit into that, what it means to be an Excel hero, super important stuff. I'm going to show a demo of Power Query, Power Pivot, and a few macros as well, and explain how to create automated systems in Excel to save you a ton of time with your job. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So like I said, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box. There's a button down there at the bottom of your screen if you're joining late. Put them in there. I'll be happy to hang out and answer questions at the end. And my one ask of you is to just close all other distractions if you can. Close down the email. You don't need Excel open or any other tools or anything like that open. Just take some notes, have pad of paper, take some notes, and close down all the other distractions if you can, and that'll help you get the most out of this. So here's my interpretation of what I call the modern Excel blueprint, kind of how things fit into Excel nowadays. And at the bottom of this, we have Excel Foundation. So this would be everything on a worksheet, really. Your formulas, tables, filters, slicers, all this kind of stuff we have on worksheets. And then we have Power Query. And so that's kind of above or outside of Excel. We have Power Query, which helps us get and transform data. And I'm going to talk more about Power Query. We also have a tool called Power Pivot, which allows us to join and calculate data. And then we have good old pivot tables and dashboards. And this is kind of inside Excel, but also this skill set is also outside of Excel because it applies to a new tool called Power BI, which is also outside of Excel. And I'm going to talk about Power BI too. We're going to go into all of these tools. So don't worry, we're going to go into all these tools. And then we also have macros and VBA, which I like to think of still kind of sits at the top here, allows us to automate all aspects of Excel. So again, we're going to talk about each of these, and I'm also going to send you a printable version at the end of today's training. So don't worry about screenshotting this or trying to write all this down. I don't want to waste your blue ink or anything like that. I'll send you a printable version at the end today. And so, and one other thing here, if this looks overwhelming to you and you're not familiar with all these tools yet, don't worry, it is a bit overwhelming, and that's why we're here today. I'm going to try and do my best to break this down and make it easier to understand. And when I started out with Excel, I started in 2005 with like an all Excel accounting job. We were doing Excel all day, every day. And I was doing a lot of the same boring data prep work over and over again. And this might be the case for you as well. And so I needed to find a faster way to get things done, reduce overtime, just reduce kind of the stress and some of the boredom, honestly, that I was having in my job. I have a picture of a clock here because I was kind of a clock watcher at my job when I first started out. I liked Excel, but there's aspects that were just boring. And so the learning was slow for me. I did a ton of Google searches. I went to the University of Google to try and figure things out. You know, went down those YouTube rabbit holes of starting out watching an Excel video and then end up watching surfing videos or cooking videos at some point. And it took me years to learn automation, especially with macros and VBA. I started out with macros and VBA. And then the power tools came along, which we're going to talk about today. And that was another slow process. There's kind of a balance there of like, how much time do I spend learning versus working? And maybe I want to automate some of these boring things and learn some new stuff, but then I also need to get my job done. So there's kind of that balance there. So you might be feeling this way as well. And my breakthrough came when I realized that automation was key to my growth. This was key to my success, was automating. And I could take like a boring 8-hour task and turn it into 30 minutes or less when I learned to automate Excel. I could do things much, much, much faster. And I also realized that automating myself out of jobs actually made me more valuable. It's kind of backwards thinking. A lot of times we think, ooh, I don't want to do automation because I'm going to automate myself out of a job. They won't need me anymore. The computer will just do everything for me, right? We kind of have this, that fear in the back of our mind. But actually what I found was it just led to many more new opportunities to help others, to get recognized and kind of become that Excel hero, that Excel go-to guy in the office. And then I started the Excel Campus blog and YouTube channel in 2010 to help others learn Excel as well, kind of take my knowledge online and share it with others. And that's grown. We've seen massive growth over the years with Excel Campus, which I absolutely love. I've also developed several Excel add-ins. I became a Microsoft Excel MVP in 2014. That's just an award from Microsoft. And one of the benefits there is I get to communicate with the product team at Microsoft and see what's coming next in the product, all the cool new features coming out next, and give them my feedback and stuff like that. So I'm honored to be a part of that program. And ultimately, I just love to solve problems with Excel. I look at Excel as just this tool with infinite possibility, and hopefully you do too. And if not, I want to share kind of how I look at Excel and maybe open your eyes up to that as well, because I think it's just a very powerful tool with infinite possibilities for creativity. So I believe that automating Excel is the most effective way to definitely save time with our job, produce amazing results, and also get recognized. And my goal here today is to provide you with a clear learning path to becoming that Excel hero, and to do it faster and easier than I did, because it took me obviously years to get to that point. And of course, I want to make that faster and easier for you. So I think we really kind of have two main challenges here with becoming an Excel hero and learning these tools. And the first is just understanding where you're at on your journey right now and where to go next. And so I'm going to talk a bit about what I call the Excel Hero Framework. And this is kind of a new training. I've never done this before, but I think it's really important, kind of your ladder or your journey to becoming that Excel expert in the office. And kind of at the bottom of this, we have what I call #bored. And you might be this person if you're not really sure what path you're on. You're just kind of doing the same stuff over and over again. You're not sure what to learn next. Work's kind of boring. You might be watching the clock. And by the way, this is totally fine if you're there. Don't worry about it, because these are all kind of just seasons, and I've been through all of these myself. And that's why I want to share this with you. Next is the hustler. And you might be kind of on the path to burnout here. You feel like there's never enough time in the day. You're just stressed. You got so many things on your plate. One way you might know you're a hustler is if you're actually doing work right now while this webinar is going on. If you got work going on the side, you're answering emails, you're doing something like that, that's a good indication you're a hustler. Again, no judgment here. I've been through all of these. Next is the hoarder. And this one I kind of had a bit of an epiphany about recently. And the hoarder is someone that knows a lot about Excel, but they also are finding it difficult to find new opportunities. They kind of feel stuck in some ways. And this might be you if you're creating like very advanced models or Excel solutions that only you know how to maintain and use. Therefore, you might do this out of thinking you're creating some job security, but what kind of ends up happening is you kind of get stuck doing and maintaining those same projects all the time. There's not time for new opportunity. So I kind of call that one the hoarder. Again, I've been there myself. And then at the top of this, we have the hero. And of course, the hero has a lot of freedom in their work. They get to choose which projects they want to work on, and they feel like work is exciting and challenging as well. Of course, you're getting recognized at your job. So I'm curious to know where you think you're at in this journey right now. Again, no judgment here, but you can type in the chat where you think you're at on this journey, and check out the chat. Cool. Yeah. So I see a lot of hustler. The chat's going super fast, but I see a lot of hustler for sure. Hustler, hoarder, heroes. We got some heroes. That's awesome. I love to hear that too. That's so cool. Hustler. Yeah. So hustler seems to be the winner for sure. I should have done a poll so we could get some numbers. We'll go analyze it later. But that's cool. Thank you for typing in and voting. That's great to see. Not necessarily great that you're a hustler. Of course, we want to help you get out of that kind of overwhelm for sure. We're going to show how to do that today. I also want to share a story of a real life Excel hero here. This is Kristen Korpler. She's a member of our VBA Pro course, and she was a data analyst doing a lot of data cleansing, kind of that boring, repetitive stuff that took hours every month in Excel. And she decided to learn to automate Excel when a bigger project came up from the CEO that she had an opportunity to work on. And since she did that, she can now take complicated spreadsheets and make them easier for others to use, which means she doesn't have to maintain them anymore. So this is really important and key. She shared her story with us in a video. I won't play the video now, but the key part there is making things easier for others to use. She's able to help other people, and now her company is finding all kinds of projects for her to work on, and it's the creative problem-solving stuff she likes to do. So I just wanted to share her story real quick to kind of give you an idea of what that Excel hero role entails, and it should bring a lot more joy to your job, a lot more free time as well. So challenge number 2 is all about the tools. I know everyone's interested in the tools, and we're definitely going to cover that for the majority of the training today. So which tools do I use to solve problems and create these automated systems to save me time? Well, I like to think of the tools as superheroes that we can call on in Excel. So we're going to talk about superheroes today too. If you notice there, I'll jump back to Kristen's slide in the back there. She had pictures of superheroes on her wall, and that inspired me for these superheroes as well. So I like to think of these superheroes that we call on in Excel. And of course, we have this blueprint here, so we're going to talk about each of these, and we're going to go out of order. So we're going to start with Power Query because I think that's kind of the #1 place or the most popular thing, the thing that's probably in most demand when we're thinking about learning new tools. I like to think of Power Query as Superman because we can call on him often, but I also like to think of him as Superman in an ugly Christmas sweater. And the reason I have this is because Power Query has gotten a bad rap. It's gone through a name change. It's been called Get and Transform. And it's also probably the #1 thing that's preventing people from using Power Query, in my opinion, is that the user interface is difficult to navigate. It's kind of hard to figure out when you're first starting with it. Once you get familiar with it and understand it, it's easier to use. But when you're first starting out, it can feel overwhelming and you're not really sure how to use it. So we're going to hopefully break that down into a simple process here. Before we jump into Power Query, I want to talk about the data analysis process. And this is like 3 steps that I see. First thing we're doing is getting and transforming our data, bringing the data into Excel and cleaning it up. Next, we calculate and analyze the data, and then we visualize and present. So this is kind of the process. Calculating would be formulas, pivot tables. Visualize is going to be charts, dashboards, that kind of thing. So where do you think as a data analyst you spend most of your time? Or where do data analysts spend most of their time? 1, 2, or 3? You can put that in the chat as well, 1, 2, or 3. I'm just curious to see what you say here. Yeah, okay. So again, I see a lot of 1s and 2s, a lot of 1s and 2s. That's awesome. Yeah, 1s, 2s. Thank you for voting, by the way. Yeah, I see some 3s, a lot of 1s, and a lot of 2s, usually a 2. Yeah, cool. And there's no right or wrong answer here, by the way. The reason I'm sharing this is I recently read an article from Forbes that said that 79% of data analysts spend their time collecting, organizing, and cleansing data. And this was a survey they did of data analysts, which is step 1. And this might be you. When I really think about it in my jobs, this was probably me too. I was spending a ton of time cleansing data, which means our job looks like this. If this is you and you spend 80% of your time cleansing data, you have 20% of the time left to do the fun stuff, right? The creative stuff. Kind of cleansing data is kind of boring. Like maybe the first time you figure something out, it's cool. But then after, if you're just doing that every week or every month, it gets boring, right? It's not necessarily the fun stuff. It's the stuff you tend to make errors on because you're kind of bored and tend to make errors. And we all know what that can cause. So fortunately, we have this tool called Power Query, which allows us to automate this process. It's a data automation tool. Power Query is a data automation tool. I'll also explain why I have a picture of a donut here. It says "You are magic" in the background there. And I like to think of Power Query as a magical tool. It allows us to bring data into Excel from external sources or Excel. It allows us to cleanse and prepare data. We can also combine or stack data. We're going to see an example of that. We can even group and summarize data. And Power Query is available on Excel 2010 for Windows and later. So today, there's probably no excuse to not have Power Query or have access to it or be able to get it. So there's really 3 steps to Power Query. The first is that we're going to get data from almost any source. And that could be the database, it could be on the web, it could be an Excel file or multiple files. We then bring it in and transform it with the Power Query editor. And then we output the data to Excel or the data model. We'll talk about the data model too. That's really the 3-step process. Kind of the fourth and maybe magical step is that when we do this, we end up being able to automate the entire process with a refresh of the query. So when we get new data, we can just refresh our query. The whole thing runs again and outputs our new data, updates our data. So it's a very powerful tool, hence the name. So let's dive into Excel. I'm going to open up Excel now and we'll take a look at Power Query. Cool. So let me see, let me open this file too. So I have kind of an instruction sheet here, there we go, on what we're gonna do. And we're gonna combine a bunch of CSV files that were exported from a system. Again, you could connect directly to a database or these could be Excel files. This is just for this example. I'm going to remove some columns, filter out a product, and then convert an order date column to a date data type. So I'm just gonna quickly open one of these CSV files so you can see what's inside of it. Here's the CSV file. It has order data, order information here for each row. So it's just some data here. Go ahead and close that. So, and again, you don't need to be following along in Excel. I'm gonna go fast here. It's just a demo to show you kind of the power of what this tool can do. And again, the idea here is we're gonna take all of these CSV files, they all have the same structure. We're gonna combine or stack them all together and then do some transformations or some cleanup work on them. So I'm gonna go to the data tab on the ribbon. Power Query was put on the data tab of the ribbon in Excel 2016. If you're on 2013 or earlier, it'll be a add-in and I'll have a separate tab up here. But again, don't worry about that right now. I'll have information on how you can get Power Query and a whole video on that. So this is Power Query over here, this get and transform data section with some buttons here where we can get data. And in this case here, you can see there's a ton of options for databases, all kinds of different online services you can connect to. We're just going to get data from a folder. And I have that folder here. I'm going to copy this folder path. I'm just going to hit Control-C to do that. Control-C. And then Power Query is going to prompt me for the folder path. And I'm just going to paste it right here. You can also browse for it as well. I'm just saving us some time. And then we'll hit OK. And Power Query will bring up a window with some options. And it's just showing us these files, kind of a preview there. And we're going to choose to combine and transform this data. So we have options here. I'm not going to go into every single option, but we're going to do what's called combine and transform. So the combine is actually going to stack that data for us. It's going to do what's called an append in Power Query. It gives us a combined files window, a lot of options here, but we can really just say okay and let Power Query do its magic. And so it's going to evaluate. It'll take us a second or two here and then open the Power Query editor. Oops, it opened on my other screen. I'll bring it over here in just a sec for you. Let it load up. Good, good. And yes, I'll be sharing the files as well. I saw a question come up there, the files and the presentation files too. So take some notes, but some of the slides I show have images and stuff. I will send you those. So don't worry about like screenshotting them or trying to draw all that stuff out. Sorry if I forgot to mention that. So here's the Power Query editor. This is a new window that's opened up on top of Excel. We can see Excel in the background here. And then we have the Power Query editor. You can see there's all kinds of buttons up here that will allow us to do transformations to our data and different tabs here with different transformations. And this is also showing us a preview of our data. So here we can see if we click the filter dropdown, load up some more, we have all of our CSV files all combined here in this preview. And over here, we have the query settings pane and the steps that the query is going through. So keep an eye on this pane over here as I take some steps here and I'll show you what happens there as well. So the first thing we want to do when we're cleaning up this data is we have some purchaser info out here on the very far right, these columns. We're just going to remove those. We can select them with Shift. I'm going to right click, remove columns, and that will remove those. Now that's not removing those columns from the original source, the CSV files. It's just removing them here in this preview, and then when we output the data, Power Query is going to do that work in memory and only output what we have here in our preview. So that's good to know. You'll also see that steps added over here, remove columns. Next thing we want to do is filter out product 10. So on our product ID column, just going to go to product 10 here, uncheck it, filter it out, or delete all the rows for product 10, and we're done with that. So we've filtered out product 10. We don't need that for our reports. The next transformation we're going to do is a very cool one. I'm going to select this order date column, and this Power Query is not recognizing this as a date. It's day, month, year. And if I was to right click, change type, and change type to a date, you can see we'll get some errors here. We don't want that. This is just not being recognized as a date. So we need to do a conversion here, date conversion. So it's a little more advanced stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that step. You can also delete steps or modify them. So I'm going to delete that change type step. So I'm going to select this order date column, go to add column, and this is a really cool feature called column from examples. I'm going to do column from selection. It should be renamed because it's so much cooler than column from examples. It's kind of magical in what this tool can do. So right here we have this new column, and we're evaluating the order date column. And in here, I want to convert this to a date. So I'm just going to type the date like I know Excel would recognize it, 05/24/2018. Hit enter. And then I'm going to do another one, row 2, 07-14-2018. Hit enter. And after I do that, you can see the entire column has been filled. Power Query's figured out what I'm trying to do, and it's recognized the pattern, and it's created this formula here. Now this big long ugly formula is based on what's called the M language. So it's another formula language that Power Query uses, but you don't have to know any of that stuff. That's more advanced, and it's good to understand it eventually. But when you're just starting out, you don't need to know that. We can just do this by clicking some buttons. And so now we'll say, okay, that looked good. We'll keep that. We can double click this. We'll change it to date. And then when we right click here, change type, we can now change it to a date data type. You can see that Power Query is recognizing this as a date data type. And this means we can analyze this with formulas, pivot tables, etc. Back in Excel. We could also remove the original order date column now if we wanted to. If we didn't want this here, we can also move columns around and things like that. So tons of stuff we can do with Power Query. That's just a really quick demo. Again, don't worry about following every single step there. Just a quick demo on what we can do. And now the next step is we're going to go to the Home tab, and we're going to click this Close and Load button. It's another thing, in my opinion, that needs to be changed in Power Query. But we're going to click Close and Load. And what that's going to do is add a new sheet to our workbook with our output. So here's a new sheet in our workbook with our outputted data. We hit the filter drop down here. We can see we have all 5 divisions right here. So here's the output of our query. We also have a queries pane. Might be able to pull it over here where we can see our new query as well. So it's very powerful, but where this gets even more powerful is I'm going to open that folder again that contain these data files. Let's say we get some new data. Either these files are updated, or in this case, I have more data from divisions 6 and 7. So I'm going to select these. I'm going to hit Control-C to copy those, or of course you could drag and drop. I'm going to take those and put those in my data folder. So I now have data for divisions 6 and 7, new data. This could be data for a new month, whatever it is. Now I'm going to go back to Excel, now that I have that data, the CSV files in there, and all I need to do now is refresh this query. And it's as simple as going to the table here, right-click, refresh. That's going to run the refresh. You might have seen it really quickly over here in the Queries and Connections pane. It did a little refresh. And now if we hit the Filter drop-down menu, we can see that we have data for divisions 6 and 7. So what's happening there is that Power Query is rerunning that query. All those steps we just set up and did, every single time we get new data or our data changes, we just right-click refresh here. That'll refresh our data. If we have pivot tables connected to this, we refresh those pivot tables, and those are all refreshed too. And there's a refresh all button on the data tab of the ribbon up here, so you can refresh everything at one time. So this is where we can drastically save time with preparing data using this data automation tool. Cool. And the files, if you have questions, put those in the Q&A box. I'll be happy to answer those at the end. I saw one question about do the files have to be the same? Not necessarily. It's best if they're the same structure, but they don't necessarily have to be. There's workarounds for that too. Yeah, so it's a great question. Cool. So I like to think, the reason I had a picture of the donut before is I like to think Power Query is one of these donut machines. If you've ever been to Krispy Kreme or any other place like this, you kind of just put ingredients in one end and then out comes these perfect donuts on the other end. I like to think of Power Query like that as well. It's an amazing tool, and it saves us a ton of time by preparing data with consistency. So every single time we're having consistent output here, not making mistakes or forgetting steps and then having to start over and wasting time with that. It can also be an alternative to VBA. We're going to talk about VBA today, but Power Query can do a lot of things that VBA could have done in the past for bringing data into Excel, that piece of the equation. And it's packed with a ton of features. I barely scraped the surface today, but it has its own nuances as well. Just like Excel and every other tool we have, it has its own nuances and things to learn there. And I think the user interface is really the one that's typically the biggest hurdle. So I'm curious to know where you're at with this tool. And you can put this in the chat. Just on a scale of 1 to 10, how effectively are you using Power Query right now? You could just rate yourself there if you want to. You don't have to put this in the chat. But if you were a 10, kind of give this some thought too. If you were a 10 with this tool, if you were an expert with this tool, what would that do for you in the next 12 months? So just kind of give that some thought too. And I encourage you to kind of make a decision there. That way, as we go through this blueprint today, you can decide which of these tools will be the best for you. You might not need every single tool to get your specific job done. Yeah, cool. So thank you for voting. I see a bunch. The funniest one that just flashed by, I'm sorry, I don't know who said it, was a negative 2.5. That's hilarious. And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. Yeah, but it's good to know, understand where you're at. And again, where you could be with this tool, how it would benefit you is the most important thing there. That's so funny. I love it. Okay, so let's move on. Next one we're going to talk about is pivot tables and dashboards. I said we're going to go out of order, and I hope that's not too confusing to anyone, but we're going to look at pivot tables and dashboards next. And I like to think of pivot tables and dashboards as Wonder Woman, obviously beautiful to look at and also help us slice and dice our data. So that's pivot tables and dashboards. And let's just jump into a demo. So I have another file here. Oh, negative 2.5, that's hilarious. So here's a dashboard, and I'm going to explain how we can get here with pivot tables. And I'm going to go back over to our order sheet. So in this file, I have our order sheet, and this is the order data that we just prepared with Power Query. And the first thing I'm going to do is just create a really quick pivot table. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with pivot tables, that's totally fine. On the Insert tab of the ribbon here, I'm going to choose Pivot Table. And I'm just going to say OK here, and this is going to add a new sheet with our pivot table. So a pivot table is basically just a summary report. It's a tool in Excel that allows us to very quickly create summary reports without having to write a bunch of formulas to do so. So we have this pivot table here. Over on the right side, we have what's called the pivot tables fields list, where we build out the pivot tables. And for this particular one, I'm just going to do a let's see, I'll do put location in the rows area. So this is going to put all of a list of my unique locations in the rows area here. So if we were to look back at our order sheet, of course, we have this location column, and there's a bunch of duplicates here. And what the pivot table does is just create a list of unique values. So we can do a summary report. So it's doing all that work for us, the list of uniques. And then we'll take the quantity field and put that in the values area. And that's automatically going to create a sum of quantity. So again, without writing any formulas, we're just doing some drag and drop. We have this quick summary report from our data set, a sum of quantity by location. You might want to sort this. I'll right click, sort, let's say largest to smallest. And so we have that sorted. Now, and this is a very basic pivot table, basic kind of introduction to pivot tables here. They can do a lot more than this, as we'll see with Power Pivot, but basic introduction. And another thing we can do with pivot tables is create pivot charts, which are connected to the pivot table. So I'm going to go to the Analyze tab up here and choose Pivot Chart. Here, there we go. Oops, sorry. Clicking too fast. There we go, Pivot Chart. And we're going to insert a bar chart here. We'll just insert a bar chart. This is a pivot chart. So now we have our data visualized, or our report is visualized here on this chart. And of course, you could take extra steps to format this, and I recommend you do that, but I'm just going to leave it as is for now. I apologize if this is hard for you to look at. And so this pivot chart is connected to the pivot table. So anytime we make changes to the pivot table, those will be reflected in the pivot chart automatically. And the other thing we can do here is add slicers. So again, I'm going to go to the Analyze tab. I'm going to insert a slicer. And here's a list of all of our fields, all of our columns in the data set. Let's choose division name for now. Hit OK. And that's going to insert this slicer here. And these slicers allow us to filter our data, to filter our pivot table and our pivot chart. So if I just wanted to see information for division 2, I can click that there. And now I'm just seeing this pivot table and chart for division 2. Of course, you can interact with these, and very quickly here, we've created basically a mini dashboard, an interactive report here that a user can use without having to know a lot about Excel or what formulas you used or anything like that. There is no formulas here, which is very cool. So we can use pivot tables and dashboards to, or I'm sorry, pivot tables and pivot charts to create dashboards. And that's what I have here on this first sheet. We have just a basic dashboard here with 4 charts. You can see we have some slicers over here, and these allow us to slice and filter down all of the pivot charts here. So we can connect all the pivot charts to one slicer or multiple slicers, and then this becomes an interactive dashboard in Excel. So there's other ways, of course, you can create dashboards. You can use formulas and things, but pivot tables and pivot charts just make this so easy. You could build this out in a matter of minutes, like we just did with that single pivot table, and then you can go build more pivot tables and charts and then copy and paste them all to your dashboard sheet. So that's a quick deep dive on dashboards. I know some of you have experience with those, so we won't take a ton of time up there with dashboards. Again, if you have questions, click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and put your questions in there. And I only ask that because the chat, there's no way there's now thousands of replies in the chat, and I won't be able to answer questions from there. So please do that, and that way, and I'll hang out at the end and answer your questions. Yes, this will be recorded, and we'll also send out a replay afterwards. Yeah, Lainey says slicers, wow. Yeah, slicers are awesome. They're such a cool tool because and one thing I forgot to mention about Kristen's story, I showed Kristen at the beginning. She was, creating a little bit more advanced stuff with macros, but same basic principle here. She was really creating buttons that her users could use in her workbooks. And so they didn't have to know every single aspect of Excel. They could, and it made it just easier for users, for people that aren't as Excel savvy as you, to use your files, to share those with others, to help other people. So yeah, it's cool. Marie says, finally, or at last I understand slicers. Awesome. Okay, great, thank you. It was a very quick demo, but happy to hear that. Yeah, slicers are super cool because of that interactivity without us having to really do much to create it, right? And you can also use them on multiple charts or multiple pivot tables. You can connect them all together, which is really, really cool. Yeah, they're a fantastic tool. Kind of underrated, I would say, in Excel for sure. Cool. All right, so back to our blueprint. Next, we're going to look at Power Pivot. I did see a few questions flash through there in the chat about Power Pivot. So again, if you have those, put them in the Q&A box. But we are going to look at Power Pivot next. So I like to think of Power Pivot as Spider-Man, and for a few reasons, but mostly, he creates these webs, and that's what we do with Power Pivot. We create webs or connections between our data tables in Power Pivot. So what is Power Pivot? This is also called the data model, the place where we store our data, where we store our donuts. Hope I'm not making you too hungry yet. And this allows us to, again, connect and store data, create relationships between tables. We could do calculations with DAX measures and summary reports as well. And we can do this on large data sets, million+ rows. Yeah, so it's very cool stuff. Again, available on Excel 2010 and later for Windows. So everyone should be able to get access to it now. I like to think there's 4 steps to Power Pivot. First, we're going to add data to the data model. The data model is in Excel, and I'm going to jump into Excel and show a demo of this. Then we create relationships between the tables. We can write DAX formulas for more advanced calculations. And then we can create the reports with pivot tables and even the cube functions. A little bit more advanced stuff there, but so powerful. Cube functions are another one that is underutilized for sure. So that's kind of the process there. I'll send you this. So don't worry about, again, don't worry about trying to write all that out. I'll send you a downloadable version of this, printable version, I should say. Power Pivot, all right. So I'm in this file here, and there we go, expand this down. Oh, there we go, oh, there we go. Okay, I guess that's not gonna stay today. And I have the Power Pivot tab here, and I'm going to, before I get there, actually, I'm gonna go back to this file. We had the orders, so we have this order data. I also have some budget data that I brought into this file. And this you could do with Power Query as well, bring in your budget data, also transform it and do that stuff like that. But here I have some budget data, and this is budget data by product by month. So that's the time periods we have here, by product by month, and we have total units. So that's kind of our time period for this data, higher level summary data, right? Our orders, we have orders by day, every single day. We have orders, so the time period's more detailed, right? So we have this budget data. And I also have a products table where we're going to relate these 2 tables together, because the budget has a product column. The orders has a product ID column, doesn't have a product column. So in order to create a relationship between those 2 tables, we're going to use this products table here. Now, typically, if you didn't use Power Pivot, you might do that with something like a VLOOKUP formula, or maybe some kind of sum ifs to try and get your budget data into your orders data, or your orders data into your budget data, right? It might be a couple different ways to go about that. But that's typically what you might try and do with formulas in order to compare these data sets, so we can create a summary report that shows actual versus budget, right? Because that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to compare these 2 tables and create reports and analyze them. Power Pivot makes this process much easier. So I'm going to open up the Power Pivot window. Again, this Power Pivot's an add-in for Excel. So you just enable the add-in, and then you'll see this Power Pivot tab. Hit the Manage button here. There we go. That'll open another window. So like Power Query, we had a separate window. Power Pivot has a separate window as well. And so here we're just seeing a preview of all of our data. Again, this is called the data model. So we load up, or we connect to the data from Excel, or we can do that directly from Power Query and into the data model. We don't have to have the data in a spreadsheet, which is cool too. And here I just have all of my data tables. I also have a calendar table, which allows us to connect both the orders and budget data by date as well. So we can do reports by month and analyze it that way. And so we also have in the bottom right corner here, we have the diagram view, or the relationship view. There we go. And that will show us this view, which shows our tables here and all the fields or columns within the table. And it allows us to create relationships. And in database terminology, these are called joins. So it allows us to create these joins here and join fields and connect these data tables together. This is just simple drag and drop. You just take a field and drag it over here, and it creates that connection. And so once you do that, once you have those connections set up, you can then create pivot tables. I'll go here to this actual versus budget pivot table. I now have a pivot table where I'm have actuals versus budget in the same pivot table. So this is data from two different data sources in the same pivot table. And I have a pivot chart that compares those as well right here. And the same simple drag and drop that we did before to create all this. The difference is over here in the fields list, you'll see the budget table. If I collapse that, you'll see the calendar table. We have our orders table down here with all of our fields as well. And we're able to add these fields into the pivot table. So that's, again, very basic overview of Power Pivot. The other major feature of Power Pivot is DAX measures. So on the Power Pivot tab here, we have this measures. We can go manage measures. And here we have the advanced calculations. These don't have to be advanced calculations, but you can do some crazy advanced stuff with DAX measures. And there's this window here where you can type or write out your formulas. So this is similar to formulas in Excel, except we're analyzing the filtered context, or basically the data in these tables, these tabular format, these tables in our data model. And we're referencing tables and table columns and column names here. You can do something as simple as sum. You can use the calculate function to do like more of a sum ifs. And there's a massive library of different functions that you can use in DAX as well to solve problems and do advanced calculations. And you're doing calculations on, again, multiple data sets. So you might be, analyzing the actuals versus budget, or doing run rates, or whatever it is with measures as well, DAX measures. So it's a formula language within Power Pivot. So that's why I showed it last, because you can use pivot tables on their own. You don't have to use Power Pivot, but you can use it, again, for more advanced calculations. Typically, when you're doing comparisons between data sets, like actual versus budget is a great example. There's a ton of others. If you got your own data and you're comparing it to like marketing data or industry data or something like that, it's another good use too. Tons of uses for it. All right, cool. There we go. So again, just a quick overview of Power Pivot. It helps us store, relate, and calculate data, reduce formula maintenance, connect and compare to different data sets, and understanding DAX is ultimately important. I like to think of it as the party pineapple. A little complex and rough on the outside, but sweet and juicy on the inside. That's my analogy. So again, I'm just curious to know where you're at with Power Pivot or pivot tables, either of those. You can type this into the chat too. With either of these topics. And also what's most important to consider is if you were a 10 with these, again, what impact would that have on your job in the next 12 months? How could you really utilize these tools? And again, I encourage you to make a decision there and see if this is a good fit for you based on what you're doing now or what you want to do in the future. It's another thing to think about too. If that's not your job now, but you want it to be yours in the future, definitely think about that as well too. Yeah, so I see pivot tables in mid-range. Some say pivot tables mid-range, Power Pivot 0, Power Pivot 2. Yeah, never use Power Pivot. Yeah, totally fine, but it is a very obviously powerful tool. Cool. So next we're going to quickly look at Power BI. So Power BI is a desktop app, and this is a separate app from Excel, which has Power Query, Power Pivot built into it. So this is a business intelligence tool. It's really a dashboard and reporting tool outside of Excel. Compares to something like Tableau, if you've ever heard of that, business intelligence tool. The great part about Power BI is that it has these tools built into it, Power Query and Power Pivot. So if you learn these for Excel, that knowledge directly translates to Power BI. And it also has this visuals layer with new charts. But these are basically pivot charts. So I showed pivot charts today and pivot tables, and that whole, those techniques and skill set all directly apply to Power BI. So super cool because this is becoming a very popular tool. Microsoft is investing heavily in this tool. They're releasing updates every single month, and they're going to be, they already are a major player in the business intelligence market, but their plans are to dominate that. And I'm sure they will, just like they do with everything else. So Power BI is a good one to learn as well. And it also has a web app. So you could, the main benefit here is instead of emailing files with dashboards to other people or putting those on a server, you can share them on the web or do that internally. And there's also a mobile app where users can access the dashboards and reports. You can even get it on your Apple Watch, which is cool. So that's Power BI. I wanted to quickly cover it. We're not going to go into a demo, but I do want to quickly cover it. I have additional training on it if it's something you're interested in. Next is the Excel foundations. I like to think of this as Incredible Hulk because basically the core of Excel is very powerful, very useful, but it can get ugly sometimes. So this is, I'm not going to go into a demo here either. This is just everything we know in Excel: functions, formulas, dates, charts and slicers, and even pivot tables. You can use pivot tables in regular Excel without having to use Power Pivot or anything like that. So that's just kind of the foundation level there. Again, not going to go into a demo. The one I do want to cover quickly is macros and VBA. So this sits at the top, and this sits at the top because macros and VBA can still automate every single aspect of Excel. So it's still, for me, definitely at the top, very useful tool. It's really the only tool that can do full-scale automation across every aspect of Excel. I like to think of it as Batman, because Batman always has these really cool tools that he can use for different jobs, right? Different problems he's got to solve to save the day. And that's absolutely what macros and VBA is. So it's a very powerful tool. It allows us to program the objects in Excel or even the other Office applications. Any task you're doing manually now can be automated with VBA. And this allows you to create just automated systems to help save others time and make Excel easier to use. And it gives you power over Excel to help with just any project. It really gives you that power over Excel to come in and save the day when needed. So let's jump into a quick example. I'll go through this. It's not going to be a full demo on VBA, but I do want to show just some uses. Oops, wrong screen. Sorry about that. For VBA. You might have seen this before if you've been on my other trainings. I've kind of broken it down into 5 different categories. With VBA, we can do like simple day-to-day data-related tasks, something like removing duplicates or creating a list of unique values. I can select a column here, click this button to run a macro. It gives me a list of unique values on a new sheet. We can create formulas with macros and VBA. We could even do things like this format copier here. So if you're exporting data out of a system and it's raw data that looks like this, we can have macros that format it, that do all that formatting and transformation for us. And I should just quickly mention, I'm going to go to the Developer tab, hit the Visual Basic button here and open the VB editor. There we go. That when we're talking about VBA, VBA is the coding language we use to write macros. So maybe you've heard of macros before, but macros are just these programs that we can run to do automations on Excel. So I have a bunch of different modules, code modules here with different macros. Here's the macro to remove duplicates. So if you read through this, it's adding a new worksheet here, worksheets.add, adding a new worksheet, doing some paste values here, and then eventually does the remove duplicates down here. So just kind of some steps there, and when you run the macro, the computer runs all these steps in order, runs your code very, 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 very quickly, and outputs the result, the desired result that you want. Such as a quick, I just want to provide some context there on what macros do, but we can use this for workbook related tasks like creating a table of contents with clickable links to each sheet. This one I call the table of contents gallery. It has clickable links to each sheet in the workbook and these image tiles of each sheet in the workbook. And so this is just a macro you can run on any file you have. And I have a blog post on this as well, something I created, and users absolutely love this. You can just click a button, run this on any file, adds a sheet with this gallery here, and your users will absolutely love this because it makes it easy to navigate through a workbook and find what you're looking for. So you can do that, save and close. You can do a lot of automation with pivot tables as well. Tons of automation you can do with pivot tables. User forms is another big one. So you can use VBA to create data input forms like this. And this is a very simple example, but you can customize this fully in the VB editor, add more fields here. In this case, you would just input data and it would add a new row to the bottom here. You can do all kinds of stuff, basically unlimited, whatever you can imagine you can do. You can also create add-ins with VBA. I've created several add-ins for Excel Campus and for other employers that I've worked for, which just give you a toolbar like this and then these buttons up here, and you can click these buttons. This is a user form I created in VBA called TabHound, which allows you to search any sheet for any sheet in the workbook with a Google-like search, double click it and go to that sheet. So that's just functionality that Excel does not have built in. And that is stuff you can do with macros and VBA. You can also do full-scale process automation. If you're doing a budgeting process where you're updating files every month, creating new files, or populating files with department information, stuff like that, distributing it out to users, you can fully automate that process, do much bigger, larger scale automation with macros in VBA. So that's super quick overview of VBA, but I definitely want to cover that too, because it's really important. My journey with automation really started with VBA. It allowed me to create these systems to save a ton of time with my job. I developed several add-ins, like I mentioned, and I've taught thousands of people VBA through our VBA Pro course. And I just believe it's still that tool, that skill set that allows you to unlock a lot of creativity in your job and solve bigger problems, help more people. So I still think it's a really important, valuable skill to have today, even though we have other tools like Power Query, which can do specific jobs of importing data extremely well. So not to knock anything there, but VBA is still a great tool. And I have an example of Charlotte. She's an Excel hero as well. She's went through our VBA Pro course, and it's allowed her to not only save a lot of time with her job, but also get recognized. She's getting bonuses and freed up a lot of time too. So, and I mentioned this because a lot of people today mentioned they were kind of that hustler, and Charlotte was there as well, kind of felt stuck, like just doing the same stuff over and over again. And it really allowed her to get recognized and become that creative problem solver. So a ton of opportunity here, and spend time with her dog. Looks like a beautiful place to live as well. So just quickly recap today's training. We went over the modern Excel blueprint. Again, I'll send you a printout of that. Thank you for hanging out today. The Excel Hero framework, another very important thing there. We looked at some data prep and automation with Power Query, data visualization with pivot tables and dashboards, some more advanced reporting with Power Pivot, and then Excel automation with macros and VBA. So I hope this has given you a good roadmap of what tools you want to learn next. You might also be wondering how you implement all of this without spending countless hours searching the web. And we do have a training program at Excel Campus called the Elevate Excel Training Program. And this is a comprehensive beginner to advanced online training program. It's a step-by-step system that will definitely help you improve your Excel skills in all different areas, all the areas we covered today, regardless of your current skill level. When you join the program, you take an assessment to determine your current skill level, and then we place you in the program at the right spot so you're challenged and you learn quickly. We also have a community forum within the program and a ton more features to help you get started learning Excel and really elevate your Excel skills to become that Excel hero of your organization. So you can learn more about that at excelcampus.com/elevate. Jump over there and you can get on the wait list for when the program opens again. With the Excel Virtually Global Summit here, we do have an evaluation that we'd love for you to take. So there's a link here. There should be a link on this page as well where you can go over and take the evaluation and just give us some feedback on what you thought about this session. So we'd really appreciate if you take the time to do this. This will help us improve the experience and the conference for next year. And then Microsoft also needs some participants, some research participants. So if you're interested in giving feedback to Microsoft to help improve Excel in the future, feedback to the Microsoft team, they'd love your help. And you can go to this link here and sign up for that as well. So it's an awesome program here. I'm a Microsoft MVP and I connect with the Excel team all the time, give them feedback as well. And they're a great group of people. Really awesome to see them working so hard to improve Excel and keep Excel awesome for us with all these new features. So definitely take the opportunity to get involved with that if you can. And again, just want to say thank you for joining me today. Again, my name is Jon Acampora. I'm over at excelcampus.com. And you can also visit excelcampus.com/free to grab our free Excel Pro Tips ebook and join our newsletter. We send out weekly Excel tips and tricks and hacks and all kinds of fun stuff every single week, new YouTube videos as well. So join us over there. I'd love to meet you, get to know you better. Join us over in the Excel Campus community. Thanks again. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.